In this lecture, I want to start with our advanced example. So the first thing we're going to do is to create a database table. In this database table, we will put our material data, so it will be persistent on the database. I don't want to fill the internal table at runtime anymore, but I want to have the data persistent on the database and select the data in the report at runtime. So therefore, I will open a new session and go to the ABAP Dictionary. The transaction code is SE11 and enter the name of our database. I will call it ZZ my material data and choose create. Now I have to enter a short description. Table. Then we have to enter the delivery class. The delivery class says what kind of data is there. We can have an application table with master and transaction data, or a customizing table. A customizing table contains customizing entries. The most tables are application tables, which contains master and transaction data. Our table also contains master data, so I will choose this one here. And then we have to say if the maintenance of the table entries is allowed, is not allowed, or with restrictions allowed. We want to maintain the table entries, so I will say it's allowed. On the next tab, we can enter the fields. The fields would be the same as we got defined in our local structure. The first one is material number. It's Z my material number. Then material text. I have no data element, so I will choose here also predefined type. Character 30 and call it my material text. Same here for the unit. But I would choose here the data type unit and a length of 3. Just like that. Save it. Of course, the object directory entry appears because we have a new object in the repository created. So we have to say local object. And yeah, we got now this information. Application tables should be client specific. So what means this? Client specific is something which is SAP like, I would say, because every system is divided into multiple clients. And as you can see, we are here also on a client. We got here that's the system ID, and that is my client where I am logged on. And usually when you have multiple clients on an SAP system would this means that all repository objects like this database table, what we create, exists on every client, but the data within the table is different on each client. And that's of course if you have multiple divisions, or if you have to separate your business, you have also multiple clients. And if you want to be, and usually also a database table is client specific, and therefore we have to enter a new field on the top of the field list. So I will click here on the first line and say here plus to insert a new row and call the field just like that. There's also an data element which has the same name, and as you can see, it has the data type client, and it's usually for all or client-specific tables in SAP. This field here is used. Now we also have to say what the key fields of our table are. That are this one here, and then we can say if initial values are allowed. I will say okay and save the thing, and now we got our table, but status is new. Another thing we have to do is also we define here the fields. Yeah. The next thing we're going to do is to maintain the technical settings. The technical settings are there to define how this table will be created on the database itself. So on the underlying database, therefore I click on this button, and now I have to say here some logical storage parameters, for example, the data class. The data class is, we can choose here also between master data, transparent or transactional data, or organization and customizing data. So here is another data class than we got on the first screen in the dictionary, because this settings here are really for the underlying database, how it should how it should be there, on which cluster on the database should be used because of this settings. So I will choose here master data, and the size category is we expect about 0 to 6,000 numbers. This should be enough, this size category. And we are here. Here are some other settings like buffering, if the table entries should be buffered or not. In our case, that are transactional data which are not frequently changed, so it should not be buffered. And I will save this whole thing and go back. And what I also want to show you is on this tab here, attributes, we got here just some attributes from which user has created a table, when, which package. We choose a local table, so we got this package here inside. What was the logon language when the database table was created, and so on. Now, when we go back to our fields table, there are also two other tabs where you can maybe enter to your single fields, also some check tables or some search help if you want to have one, or when we say here some currency and quantity fields, like when we have our currency field, for example, we have to or for our currency and quantity fields, we also have to maintain where the units are stored for these currencies and quantity fields. But in our case, we don't have anyone, so we don't have to say which reference table and fields this quantity or currency has assigned. That's also an SAP specific scenario, because usually you have to say what kind of, when you have a quantity, you have to say what kind of quantity it is. So let's go back to our fields. I would say it's enough. For our database table, we got the number, the text, and the unit. This should be enough. Now, when I check the syntax, we got here also the warning to maintain the enhancement category. So I will go back, go to enhancement category, okay, and say it cannot be enhanced. So check the syntax again. Yeah, save the object first and activate. And now really this database table is also created on the underlying database. So the status is active, everything is fine. We can now use it. But before we select the data, I want to show you how you can maintain the table entries. Therefore, we go to Utilities and say here Table Context, Create Entries. And now we got here some new screen where we can maintain the fields what we created. The client has been automatically filled with the current client. So I would say the material number, because we have also an character, is with leading zeros and 1, and say my material 1, and the unit is piece. Then I will save the record. Record was successfully saved on the database, so I can enter a new one. I will say 2, also piece, and save. It was also successfully saved. And third one, maybe not piece, but I would say kilogram, 4, also kilogram. So we have maintained our table entries. I will go back, and when we now want to have a look at table entries, we can use this button here. Now what you now here see is a selection screen where you can also restrict the list of the table entries, but we want to see all the table entries, so I will just here execute the whole one. And we got here 4 entries with the data what we have entered before. So, and what I now want to show you, this transaction here is the same as when we open a new session and go to enter the transaction code SE16, which is the data browser. Then we enter here the name of our table. We can here either create new entries, or when I press enter, I will also have this selection screen and can have a look at the table content. Just like that.